Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining in from. Very warm welcome to all of you who have already joined, and I see there are people still joining in. Uh, Welcome to this session of our series, Organizing for Project Success by Humanizing Work. This is the second episode where we're going to discuss a potentially controversial topic. Is Agile dead? And long live Pragmatic Agile. In fact, today today, or I think yesterday, the Agile 2024 conference started, and they are actually doing a hashtag is Agile dead question mark. So this is something that is on top of a lot of people's minds, and we thought it would be a good topic to discuss here, and also present our viewpoint based on the entire sort of history of Agile, especially over the last 10, 15 years, and talk about what we believe in, what our customers do, and what has been our overall experience in these last 10, 15 years. So while we wait for people to join, let me get started with some of the initial housekeeping and introductions. The webinar is being brought to you by Nimble Work, where our motto is humanize work. Once again, a warm welcome. We will start with some introductions. Like I said, I'll give you a quick introduction to the company Nimble Work for those of you who don't know us as well. And then we'll get on to our main session for today, where, of course, the focus is on Pragmatic Agile. And at the end, we will do a Q&A session, and hopefully we will get to hear from you and also learn from your experience on your Agile journey. Just some housekeeping here. We are recording the session, and we will make this session available to all of you via email after the session is done. Feel free at any point in time to ask a question. You can use the Q&A panel on your Zoom screen, which you should be able to see, I think, in the bottom of your screens. And we will take up those questions at the end, hopefully take as many of them as possible. All right, so with that, let me introduce to you today's speakers. The first is Mano Cherian. Mano is the VP of Business Development at Nimble Work. And Mano has probably worked with almost every customer of ours, at least all the large customer engagement that we've had. He's not only the guy who is engaged with them during the pre-sale period, but he's very closely involved during the implementations that we do with our customers, and therefore really brings a rich level of learning that we go through as we understand our customers' journey so far and what they're trying to do in terms of implementing Agile, implementing project management solutions, implementing other kinds of people management solutions, which help them deliver their work and their projects more successfully. Then I have Sudipta Lahiri, or Sudi as we call him. He's head of products at Nimble Work, and Sudi has been a agile lean Kanban practitioner for over 2 decades himself. Again, has been closely involved not only on the product side, but also with our customers, heading our consulting practice for Asia and India, and brings in a tremendous amount of experience in this field, both from an engineering perspective as well as from a process and methodology perspective. My name is Mahesh Singh. I'm a co-founder and I run marketing at Nimble Work. And fortunately, I've been also involved on the customer implementation side for the Western Hemisphere for the larger clients that we do, or the larger clients that we have. And as a result, we have been, have been able to really absorb some of the challenges and the lessons that we learn from those in terms of how successful companies that run agile implementations, successful projects, how they organize themselves, what are some of the key things that they do. And of course, today's topic being agile, we will focus more on that agile side. But let's come to that in a bit. Just a quick overview of the company. So Nimble Work, we have been a pioneer in web-based project and work management solutions for more than 2 decades now. We are headquartered here in Cupertino, California, which is where I'm based. My colleagues Mano and Sudi are based in Bangalore. We have a large customer base around the world, but especially in India and North America, and also Europe. And so our experience comes from all of these customers that we have worked with. We have over 1 million+ users of our customers around the world, and I invite you to learn more about us at nimblework.com. Just a quick look at our product portfolio. You'll see that we have sort of the complete end-to-end solutions, portfolio for any type of help you might need, whether it is upstream, strategic level work management of work through OKRs or project portfolio management, or whether it is a full-fledged, end-to-end project lifecycle management using agile, using hybrid agile, using traditional methodologies. And then we have specific solutions if you're looking at your teams doing retrospectives because they're looking to manage their retrospectives better to in their continuous improvement journey. We provide support for that, and we have other capabilities as well. Swift Kanban is our sort of well-known Kanban tool, which follows the Kanban method, which has been in existence for more than a decade now. And we have some amazing customers using Swift Kanban for customers who adopted Lean and Kanban as their chosen method of implementing Agile. And just the last slide here on who some of our customers are, and you'll see some very well-known names and perhaps some not so well-known names. And we are able to really support customers who are just a few, 10, 20 user teams to tens of thousands of users that our customers are using. So we are really able to scale at the enterprise level and provide a smooth experience to our customers. And again, we'd love to talk to you if you're in the market for something like this, but that is a separate topic. So with that, let's move on to the main session for the day. But before I do that, what we wanted to do was to ask a single poll question about your Agile journey. So can we show up the poll question? And can I request all of you to respond to this in terms of where are you in your Agile journey? And let's see what we see here. All right, so we're looking at either not yet started, which is rare, but once in a while we do meet companies who are just getting started or have not yet started looking at it, considering which Agile method to use, etc. And hopefully this session will help you in that. Of course, many of our customers have been and companies that we meet have been there for more than 10 years or for a very long time. And of course, there is always something in between. Sudhi, what's your experience in terms of the average duration that companies are running their Agile initiatives?
I think in bits and pieces, most organizations have been practicing it for 3 to 5 years plus.
Easily.
But as an organization, is there a very focused, systematic effort towards its adoption? That I think is much shorter in time duration. And in fact, in many organizations, still leadership teams are trying to figure out that while they need agility, but what really do and how to go about it. So I would say in teams, in a scattered pattern, it's been for a longer duration, let's say 5 year plus. But as a focused, directed effort, it's much shorter.
Okay. All right. Let's take a look at the results. All right, there you go. So we do have about 15% of the audience who have not yet started. But as you said, 30% in 3 to 5 years and 30% in the 5 to 10 years band. Still, at least 20% in the over 10 years as well. So thank you. Thank you for responding to the poll. We can probably take this away. Okay, and let's get started. So this has been a question that we have been hearing in various forms. Is Agile, where is Agile today? Agile is dead is perhaps a bit of an overstatement, but is there a serious problem with Agile? And if so, what are the challenges that companies face? So of course, Agile is not dead. In fact, as we just said in the beginning, the Agile conference is starting, and I think they have easily about 3,000 people attending the conference. So definitely very interested people who are still going on with implementing Agile in the best possible manner with whatever flavors of Agile that they may have selected. But over the last 20 plus years now, there has been a increasing amount of criticism of Agile and some of the associated challenges with that Agile. So do you want to weigh in on that? What are some of the criticisms that you see of Agile that companies have faced?
So I think the basic issue that most organizations face is that when agile methods lay out how they want teams to do whatever their method is, uh, they kind of come. They would explain why it's required. They would explain how it needs to be done. Uh, and when organizations start going through that journey, they start following that direction, right? And as a result, what is completely missing is the context in which that organization or the team is, right? The nature of its application, the dynamics of the team, right? The complexity of it. So there's a whole bunch of background and baggage based on which a team follows a certain process and a certain amount of and a certain approach, and not everything is completely a wasteful activity, completely wrong, right?
Mhm.
There are absolutely many things that are working for the teams, that they are that they are uh, that justify the way they are working today. And so when you completely miss that point and you start adopting something new, you kind of land up making a very hodgepodge mess of it, right? You struggle to drop what is working for you. You're trying to adopt something new. And in this process, both these sides get impacted negatively. So, what we talk about doing as part of a pragmatic agile thinking, as part of a pragmatic agile capability, and this is mainly driven by close to almost 1 million users that we have using our products, right?
Mhm.
um, is to kind of try and figure out how to give this bridge solution, these bridge capabilities that can help organizations move from how they are doing it today to starting and adopting these agile methods, whichever method you're trying to follow. And that's why we call it pragmatic agile. So it's not like grounded to the principle to the T. A very
Yeah.
simple
I think
example. uh, you know Agile says don't change your sprint scope during the sprint. Very hard to happen. Teams struggle to do it. Um, and we try and we accept and acknowledge, and then try and see how can we adopt and how can we modify the burn down chart and how we show the burn down, keeping in view how the scope changes happen during the sprint. So
Mhm.
that's a very simple example, very trivial example, but there are many such points that help teams move to an agile thinking, agile execution, while they are still transitioning from one way of working to another way of working.
There is a term that I have heard called cargo cult agile. It is essentially, people and teams adopting certain rituals, and whether it is sprint planning or whether it's doing daily stand-ups and things like that, and that based on adopting those rituals, they believe that they have got agile. But the real, the real sort of foundation for why agile is important and what really needs to happen in terms of an overall culture and thinking change, that doesn't happen, and therefore people struggle with it because they are simply following a few things that they've been trained on, and typically it begins with, in fact, let's say a 1 day or a half day of training of on yeah, Scrum or Kanban or some of these rituals, and then they're sent off and running to run agile. And obviously that is not enough. Obviously there is a lot more that goes into implementing agile, and that lack of understanding of the fundamental need for agile becomes a a problem, and that is really what we are that's what we are seeing with our customers, and that's what you're talking about as well. uh, all right. So, in general, if you see the evolution of the different methodologies that have come, whether it is Scrum, whether it is Kanban, scaled, there have been scaled agile methods, we've seen that there is uh, a, I would say, a struggle for mind share, a struggle for market share a struggle for becoming the established or preferred method of implementing agile. Is it just that, or is there a real belief amongst obviously the people who have initiated these new methods that this is the right way to do agile? Uh, what do you think is happening there?
In all fairness, there is no absolute way that is the right way. Right? Different organizations and different thought leaders, based on their experience, based on what has worked in their projects and their assignments that they've been involved, they've articulated a thought, a way of working. And so none of it can be said that they're wrong, whereas none of them can be blindly adopted to say, hey, I'm going to do ABCD and I'm going to be agile, right? And that's why it's very important to be able to correlate your context, your environment, your background, your team dynamics, the capability of your team, remote or distributed or face to face, everybody in one room. All these things need to be factored in to say, how will I go about in this journey, right? A lot of the methods focus very heavily on weeks and months of training, certification, only to realize that it is just the same things that were creating a problem when they were doing perhaps waterfall continue to inhibit their progress in this journey as well.
Mhm.
So there is a reason why the Toyota production system talked about continuous improvement in short cycles and short intervals, taking feedback from the team. If that cycle of continuous improvement and continuous evolution is not at the foundation of how you're implementing any method, it becomes a struggle. It becomes a recipe for difficult times. So uh, I think most methods have very, very valid, good points to think and to learn and understand, but one has to figure out the recipe that works in your environment, that you want to adapt at a pace that you want to adapt. It's like there are millions of cookbooks, but if you just
Mhm.
take a recipe from a cookbook and and just follow it to the T, different people would get different outcomes, because there are still certain things which make a difference in terms of how that recipe is followed to the T. So it is a question of how somebody understands each of these principles, the why behind the principle, and then decides, okay, how I'm going to apply it, whether I'm going to apply it, how gradually I'm going to apply it. So I think it's there is no one fixed way, but
Right.
it would be very arrogant to say they're all wrong. It will be equally arrogant to say they're all absolutely 100% to the T.
So context matters, and what is needed matters, and marrying the two together to decide what works best for you is what matters. So that really gets us to pragmatic agile, right? We've been hearing this term for the last maybe 10 years. There are various people involved in contributing to aspects of pragmatic agile. So let's talk about what do we mean by pragmatic agile? Uh, what are the things that we think are really needed in general terms for any team, trying to implement agile? Let's start from there. So do you want to talk about what is pragmatic agile
So, I
from?
mean, what we have done, sorry, Mahesh, I lost you there. So what we have done is identified different stages of the life cycle, from planning to execution to tracking how the project is doing, and try and figure out, hey, which are the pieces that teams typically struggle with in their agile adoption journey, and how can we, as a product, help with some capabilities that kind of act as a transition from going from whatever be your way of working today to an
Mhm.
evolutionary approach of how you can go towards a deeper adoption of towards business agility. So without without any bias towards any agile method, but how can you get agility from where you are? What are some of the areas that teams struggle with in each of these life cycle buckets, and that's how we have tried to tackle the problem. And we will go through it in the future
Okay.
slide decks.
All right, let's do that. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about who are some of the people who have been, is who have sort of been pioneers in defining what these different life cycle steps or different parts of the agile implementation that one can consider. So there's people like Mike Cohn, for example, who has written a lot about user stories and agile estimation. There's Scott Ambler, who of course worked on the discipline agile delivery and introduced the word. In fact, I believe it is one of the key principles of of discipline agile was being pragmatic. I think one of the founding principles. There are others like Jim Highsmith, Alistair Coburn, Dave Thomas, etc., who've all, in their own ways, talked about it. Dave Thomas talked about the pragmatic programmer and talked about it in the context of software development. Lisa Crispin and Janet Gregory, they talked about it in the context of agile testing, practical guide for testers and agile teams. Testing is a big part of discussion about how it fits in the agile life cycle and what roles do testers have, etc. So there have been many people who have contributed to this body of knowledge, and today I think pragmatic agile has become a sort of well-known method or well-known, let's say, a framework in which to think about it, philosophy to think about it. So, what Sudhi was referring to earlier, let's take a look at these different stages. So, Sudhi, just walk us through these and see what each of them might mean, and then of course we'll get into the actual.
Sure. So clearly, I think from one of the big things that the entire community talks about, and we have all come to appreciate, is how do we get engaged teams? We all acknowledge and understand that engaged teams create a very different outcome compared to if they were just doing a job, right?
Right.
And therefore one of the easiest and the very practical ways of doing it is to follow the OKR approach, right? Something where you can define your organization strategy, define the key results, break it up into the department level objectives and and their key results, and then and then be able to link your initiatives and different epics that your teams are working on with these objectives, right? So a very simple linkage, but very critical, so that people who are working on these projects know that that's how I'm going to make an impact, potentially be able to make an impact. Now, whether that impact is happening, whether your outcome is getting realized, as you track your OKR key results at whatever is the cadence that you have agreed to, you can now recalibrate and figure out whether you're on the right track, or you need to make a change. But the fact is, it creates an alignment and a transparency with what the organization is striving to do. From a planning perspective, I would say Agile has typically been extremely weak in trying to address how how to really plan something. It's not good enough to say, hey, your budget is fixed and your time is fixed and your scope is variable, then that's it.
Yeah.
Business at the end of the day needs to know, what am I going to get, how am I going to get it, when am I going to get it. And no matter how hard we try and convince them, hey, don't worry about it, we will continuously prioritize what you need to do, we will do what is most important to do, but that is no end. That does not satisfy a customer or a business who says, when will my stuff get done,
Mhm.
right? Whatever I thought is relevant and important for me. So I think it's extremely important, and Agile has been very, very weak on this topic. And we have made some very key capabilities that we built in the product to specifically work on what we call as the upstream activities, what the execution team, from the ideation to the execution cycle, and then of course from execution to your actual production deployment rollout. Most teams have done and have followed whatever the methods that they have, that they're comfortable with. But we have again identified quite a few areas where teams struggle because of the environment and the context that we are in. And so we have built some capabilities to be able to facilitate that interaction. And last but not the least, how do we really build an environment of continuous feedback in a psychologically safe environment? At
Right.
Nimble Work, one of the very uh, best examples is that whenever we have a town hall, you know, at the end of the town hall, our CEO would ask for a Q&A session, and barely there would be any questions. Nobody wants to raise their hand, stand up, and ask a question. The minute you say, hey, here's an anonymous platform where you can go in and ask your questions, and feel free to put whatever your questions, and you will get 50, 60, 100 questions in within 5, 6 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's extremely important to be able to take feedback from the people who are working on your teams in your organizations in an environment where they feel psychologically safe to be able to ask that question. And no matter how much we say that don't worry about it, it's feel free, be open, there is a natural resistance to doing it unless you give them that environment. And clearly, products like Nimble Retro are a great way of doing that.
Absolutely. I think the what you said in the beginning resonates with me in particular because we have seen this in I think almost all our customers that Agile has been traditionally very strong at the downstream, the execution. Once your scope is ready, the sprint plan is defined. It's very good at managing it and helping people understand, or rather helping people deliver products often and provide some feedback and so forth. But the upstream, where you talk about lean portfolio management, or you talk about upstream Kanban principles, where you're looking at prioritization of work and building a plan. Uh, has always been a challenge. And I think we have done some, through our experience and our own capabilities, we've done some pretty amazing stuff. So let's get into some of these in detail. Folks, I want to thank those of you who already asked questions. We will be taking these questions up. Keep them coming. We'd like to make sure that we take up all these questions at the during the Q&A. We're going to talk through some of the key things that are presented on this slide, and in case we run out of time, we probably do a follow-up session. There is a lot of interest in Pragmatic Agile that I can see. So uh, keep the questions coming. We will try and cover some of the key points on this slide, and then also give you a quick demo of what are some of the things that we do here in each of these, and then go from there. All right. So Suri, let's switch gears a little bit and go into a slightly deeper dive mode. So agile estimation. So what is agile estimation all about? I know that in the mid 2000s, or maybe a little bit later, there was this whole no estimates movement, and people sort of gave up on estimation, especially in the agile community. So what does Pragmatic Agile say about agile estimation, and how do they implement it?
So to begin with, at Nimblework, we have been a no estimate follower for the longest time. I think since 2015, 16, we stopped doing estimates. And we have been just planning and tracking based on throughput based.
Throughput based.
But at the same time, as I said, based on a feedback from our customer community, we know that most plan people in the planning function struggle to say, I am not going to have an estimation approach, right? It's like saying, I want to go from New York to San Francisco, and I don't know the distance, right?
Yeah,
So how
people
am I
want
going to plan?
predictability.
It's a very simple question that people ask, and no matter how much you tell them, oh, don't worry, there is a no estimate, great approach called no estimates, and you can actually make your journey from New York to San Francisco without knowing how much that distance is. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't fly. So what we have done is build an ability within Nimble to be able to do a very lightweight, quick estimation approach that's called relative sizing. In Agile, there are two very popular methods, one which is called the planning poker, one which is called relative sizing. We are strong believers of relative sizing. It's a very simple way of comparing two work items, saying, hey, this one looks bigger than this, or this one looks smaller than this, or this one looks similar to this. And if it looks similar, you say, if these similar cards on average have taken, 10 story points or 5 story points, I'm going to start with the 5 story point estimate and see where that goes. That's it. That's all that one is doing. Because we know anyway, whatever is an estimate, in no time that estimate is going to be out of the window once you start the execution. But at least
Exactly.
from a planning perspective, you get a sense that of a ballpark of where you're going to be. So what we're trying to do is to build a very simple approach, which is fast, very accurate, because you can say that, my mobile phone is heavier than my pen, but you can't say what is the weight of either of them very accurately. So it's very fast, it's very accurate, it is not subjective. And if you do believe in doing an estimation, then it is you're spending the least effort in getting some sense of an estimation, so that you can at least go ahead and plan and then say, okay, if in my sprint I can go ahead and accommodate X number of story points, then what are those stories that I want to plan in that sprint. So light, fast, accurate, and not subjective. It works like magic, and because it is based on past data, it's very hard to argue about it, right? Nobody can say, hey, why is this 5 and why is this not 8, or why is this not 3? It's because the past data shows that all these similar cards have taken 5 story points.
Right.
So that's what relative sizing is all about, and and it does help significantly for teams.
Light, fast, and not subjective. I think those are good words to use. I think, like you said, everybody needs some predictability, some idea of when something is going to get done. And I think pragmatic agile focuses on that, says that agile estimation is important. And I think the way that we have implemented it really makes it easy for teams to adapt it. Okay, in the interest of time, let's keep moving. So the next point was about story mapping. Now, story mapping has been around again as a method for a long time. um, I'm not sure how much uh, ground it gained, and how many teams, if we were to take 100 teams, how many of those teams are using story mapping? Where does it fit into agile, into pragmatic agile, and what do we do with it?
So everybody is familiar with the term stories, but in most cases, they use the same requirements approach and just rebrand it as stories. Requirements are not stories. Absolutely a completely misnomer. And if you continue to take your requirements and try and put them in an agile way of working, you will just not get anything out of the door at the end of the sprint, because they are by definition then not small, independent, testable. If you want something regularly to come out at the end of the sprint and be able to deploy to production, where you can get feedback and validate with your customer or user base, you need something that is independent. You need
Mhm.
something that is small. If it is not independent, they will all get stuck in the testing cycle, and they're waiting for all the dependent cards to come together when you can test them and then release it. That's why in our early days, we would all get stuck in the testing cycle and then go into 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 12 weeks of testing iteration one, testing iteration two, to make sure that the whole thing comes out. So having independent, small, testable stories is absolutely elementary, absolutely a foundational element. The issue is most people, again, do not have a structured method of doing it. Story maps are a wonderful way, a wonderful structured way of persona driven definition of stories that you can define across 3 levels, and get very high level of visibility in terms of what is going out when. Plan it out. You can do your release and sprint planning within the story mapping process itself. uh, and it works like a charm. Um, and and once you got your stories that truly follow the principles of invest, people would be
Mhm.
familiar with that acronym. If you're not, we can clarify during the Q&A session. People who follow familiar with that principle, they would know that once you've got the stories that are small, independent, testable, you negotiable, you really can deliver agile fast. Everything becomes much, much more easy. Absence of it is an equally disastrous impact.
So, but I have a clarification. Does, in general, Pragmatic Agile, does it recommend everybody do story mapping specifically, or where does it stand?
No, so clearly what we're saying is that that story mapping is one of those pragmatic agile practices that if you follow,
Should
you will
correct.
be able to make your agile execution way, way, way smoother.
Hmm. Agreed. Okay. Again, keeping on with the flow. Let's continue to the next one, which is about backlog refinement. Now, backlog refinement has been there forever. Backlog grooming, backlog refinement practices have been there forever. Where does it fit in terms of the pragmatic agile framework?
So uh, most teams would have experienced that we are able to, at least teams that have been following agile for quite some time, and I saw many of you have been doing it for 3 years, 5 years plus, that your teams are able to get stuff out of the door within 2 weeks from the time the sprint planning happens and take it out, or 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever is the sprint cycle, that sprint cadence that you have. The challenge still now, which is very poorly addressed in the agile community, is how do I move from an ideation, from a time that the market said this needs to be done or business said this needs to be done, from an ideation to a backlog of what we call as refined stories that are ready for the teams to execute. Time and again, what we see is in many organizations, teams take a story, start the sprint, and then there are questions that are going to the product person that we don't have enough functional clarity, or there are technical architecture difficulties, blockers that have not been addressed, not and have not been thought about. And so come many cards get stuck, they get blocked, there is a clarification waiting, and the entire planning process, the entire efficiency of the sprint planning process that you thought about is completely out of the door.
Mhm.
If you do a proper value streamed backlog refinement, step by step, where you go through functional clarity, you get that, you get a technical feasibility, you get that, you make sure that your people dependency, if there's some critical people requirement, you identify those. If you follow that upstream process nicely, you will be able to make your downstream process work like a charm. The catch is this, that the cycle time required, the turnaround time for the upstream process, ideation to refined stories, is typically 5x to 10x of what
Mhm.
your downstream cycle is. So all our efforts and to improve the downstream, the sprint execution makes a barely any impact to the overall outcome of the business. If you're able to figure out how to upstream your how to improve the efficiency and the smoothness of the upstream process, you will get far greater improvement in your overall turnaround time to business. So what we have tried to do is to have a very clear backlog refinement process that will help you look at the backlog, prioritize it, take it through the refinement process, and then say, okay, now these are what are ready for this for sprint execution. And now you say, okay, how much and what priority can I fit into the upcoming sprint and the sprint from there on and the sprint from there on.
Absolutely. And I think I cannot overemphasize the importance of that upstream process. I think some of the most pitched battles on, what to build, how to prioritize, which ones to take up next. I think those take the longest, time, and it's typically amongst maybe more senior people in the organization, each sort of coming from their own point of view, before it gets approved and then taken up for execution. And then once it is smooth sailing, as Suri said, but really that first part of breaking it down enough to be able to discuss it, look at the overall implications in terms of cost and impact on business and so forth, is critical and takes a lot of energy of the organization that a lot of people don't pay attention to. All right, let's take one other topic, which is about the daily stand-ups. Daily stand-ups have been there forever, but I think they get treated more and more like a status meeting, and don't serve the purpose that they're supposed to serve. What do we have to say about that?
So Absolutely, Mahesh. And yes, I think in 99% of the cases, not like 90%, in 90%, 99% of the cases, they are they become a status meeting. And they become a status meeting because they are essentially continue to be a narrative of each of the team member to their manager or the leader, whosoever it is in the team, to the senior person in the team. Um, and so what we have tried to do within the Nimble product is to give a little bit of a formalized structure, so that when the stand up is happening, every individual in the team is able to really visually see
Mhm.
what is happening, where is the work happening, what is getting blocked, is the work flowing at the right pace, or is work getting blocked, is work not flowing at, and it is getting bottlenecked. And collectively together at the end of the sprint, see how they are doing in terms of the burn down, right? So that it now becomes a good platform for the team to come together and say, hey, if this is the scope that we need to deliver, what is the corrective step that we need to do? So a stand up done right, visually presented right, can make a significant impact in the team ownership of the sprint scope, rather
Mhm.
than an individual owning their own card. So what we have seen time and again is that teams who get into this way of doing the stand up are far more engaged, that the team as a unit is far more engaged in the collective outcome of the sprint than I talk about my card, you talk about your card, the third person talks about their card, and in 10 minutes, the that
Meeting
stand-up
is
call gets over.
right. Okay, so let's do this. Shall we break and do a quick show and tell of what we've been talking about so far? And if
Absolutely.
there's more time, then we will come back to some of the additional points that we have to cover in Pragmatic Agile. In the meantime, so Mano, the stage is yours. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you can share yours. And folks, what we'll do is while we are giving you this quick demo of what capabilities Manu talked about here, I'd again welcome any additional questions on anything that you've heard so far, and we will try and take up those within about 12 minutes or so. So thanks for your patience in terms of waiting for the answers to some of the questions. And Manu, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Mahesh and Sudhi, for setting the context well for this brief demo session on pragmatic agile and how a solution like Nimble can help teams to adopt these principles in a very simplified and easy manner, and make sure that they will be able to scale it within the team and also across the organization. So to start off quickly, we will start with story mapping. As Sudhi did mention, requirements is not user stories, but you need a very formal, structured way in which you will be able to break down your requirements to independent, simple, valuable, and testable user stories. And the approach to do that is story mapping. What you're basically seeing here is three key requirements that has been documented for the project. And if we get into one of the requirements, we provide a visual interface wherein which the requirement can be broken down to its next level of details. So in this case, for this requirement, we have identified a theme and a series of epics. And what you will also notice that these epics are being defined based on the persona who is going to consume the service. So you may have multiple personas who will consume the service or consume the product feature. You will be able to segregate your next level of requirement definition based on the personas. And that way you can be more specific. And then you can further break it down to user stories. In Nimble, we allow you to break down an epic or a feature to functional stories or technical stories, and they can be represented differently within the same platform. So you are basically breaking them down to user stories, and these are small, as Sudhi mentioned, independent stories, which can be taken up by the team. It can be taken up throughout its development cycle. And once the development has been completed, it can be tested by the testing team without waiting for any dependent cards or any dependent requirements to come through. In the story mapping module, we also provide you an ability wherein, say, for example, at any point of time, if you want to know what is happening to this requirement, you will see the stories that are there in the backlog, which has not been assigned to any sprints. And you will also see the stories that are being executed across multiple sprints that has been defined within the project. So you may have multiple teams. Each team will be responsible for picking up certain functional or technical stories. So this whole visualization, wherein which you're able to define your requirement and understand that it is not a story, and then break them down to simple independent stories, and then track them to the point where you will be able to understand at any point of time which of these stories are in my backlog to complete that particular capability which the customer has asked for, and which of them are being executed in my subsequent sprint. So this gives you a sense on the timeline, what is going to come in the next 2 weeks, what is going to come in the next 4 weeks, and by when this specific use case or requirement can be completed. Now, once you have broken down the user stories the requirements to user stories, within the Nimble platform, we provide a module where all the user stories that has been identified for the project will get captured. But before we go to the user story, I have the user stories defined and I want to start going to the planning stage. But one of the important input that I would require for my planning stage is the size of the stories, because that will help me to get a sense in terms of, I know that I have a specific capacity for a sprint, which are the 4 or 5 stories I can push to that sprint, or how, whether, by when this is a high priority story, I know its size, I know its likely effort it is going to consume. And then I will be able to, in a much more meaningful manner, plan where do I push this, to which sprint or to which release do I push this specific user stories. Now, what you see here are the user stories which are not estimated. Now, say, for example, I have a user story that is going to be used by the sales team. I will be able to look at the user stories that has been completed, and I will be able to identify if I have developed or worked on a similar user story. And the moment you say, yes, I feel that this user story is similar to the user story which is over here on the basis of size, I can basically drop it over there. And the moment I've dropped it over there, you will see that when I go to the story details, it will inherit the estimate that is applicable. Its size is large, so you can have t-shirt sizing, but you get an indication on the estimate. Now, as Sudhi mentioned, it is very simple. It is easy to use. It is accurate because it is based on the fact it is getting compared with a similar user story which you have executed and delivered to the customer. Now, once the estimates are in place, now there are multiple ways in which you can use the relative size estimate. One is you can use it to determine the estimate of your lowest level unit, that is the user story. We do provide some capability where you can, map the estimates against t-shirt sizing. So I'll just leave that. But the second capability that we provide is, okay, now the customer or the product team has identified that you have to develop a new epic. What does it take for me to develop that epic? Like, say, for example, I have to develop this epic. What is it's going to take for me to develop that epic? Now, I can take, I can realize that, okay, for me to develop this epic, I may have to do some API related work. And we have done some API related epic work, which has been completed over here. So it will give you an indication which says that, okay, if you're going to pick up this epic, you're talking about creating 2 features and 8 user stories. And if the estimate data are properly entered, it will give an indication on the range of those estimates. It will tell you that this epic will take anywhere between 30 to 40 story points for its execution. So all this information is provided upfront, which is basically going to help the teams to identify the right size, and not with an arbitrary number, but with a far more accurate number. And then you can take this to the planning cycle. Now, there are multiple ways in which we support planning, and the most popular way in which we support sprint planning is through the backlog refinement process, which we offer in the tool. Now, in the backlog refinement process, you get a overview on what is the total size of backlog, what percentage of it has been completed, what percentage of it is still in the backlog queue. So you get to see that, okay, you still have 165 stories to plan for its execution and complete it. But when you are going to plan for the user stories, just navigating through a list of 165 user stories is going to be very painful. You may not pick up the right user stories that is required by the customer. You may also have ability where you can create some filters to narrow down your selection. That is a capability which we offer. That is a traditional way in which people will typically prioritize a user story, say that, okay, let me look at all critical stories and get them out of my backlog queue. But we also provide an ability where you can group your stories across multiple dimensions. And these are dimensions that can be created at the project level by the teams based on the context of work which they're delivering. Now here, since I'm working on modules for a customer, I will be able to see the listing of all the modules my team is working on. I'll be able to see which module a lot of work has been completed. Now let me take an example. Integration module is important. The customer has told that we need to work on integration. Then I just need to click on that module. I will see the distribution of work, what has been completed. So here you see that you have 17 stories. You have 17 stories in the backlog, and then you can also see a categorization. These are all custom attributes that you can set up against each story. And you can say that, okay, in the next upcoming sprint, I want to focus on all integration user stories that will focus on improving the integration UI capabilities. So what you have done is, based on certain categorization, you have been able to trim down from a list of 165 stories to 6 stories, which is actually important. And then you can choose the stories which you want to work on. And like Sudhi said, take it through a grooming process. So in the grooming process, you will detail the story. You will provide all the functional inputs, all the technical inputs, all the clarity and the clarification that is associated with it. You can collaborate, you can attach documents, you can provide the required details, you can define the acceptance criteria. All of that is defined, and you're basically saying it is ready to be pushed to the downstream system. And this will then reduce the friction that typically happens in a downstream process, where typically the technical person will come and say, I need more clarity on this. You may want to go clarify to the customer. You may block a story, put a story on hold. All of that can be minimized if you groom the stories. Once the story has been groomed, and this is where the actual planning happens. So at this point of time, you can see that in the project, there are 3 sprints that are active. So it will show you the sprints that are active and the future sprints. And then let me take the cowboy sprint over here. You will see that it has already been scoped with certain user stories. So you can go and prioritize those user stories over here, do a drag and drop. You will see the capacity that is available, and you will then be able to effectively plan the scope for a particular sprint, and then it gets rolled up to a release, and it gets rolled up to the overall project. So this is a very practical way in which you will be able to break down your requirements to stories, estimate them in a very easy and a simplified manner, and then scope them to various sprints that you have defined within the scope of your project. Now, there are multiple visualizations which we provide. So this is one of the visualization where you will very easily be able to see my backlog. You will be able to see the various sprints. You'll be able to see the capacity that has been used. There are various views which we provide here. You can see a card view, you can see a tree view, which will basically give you a perspective from the size, the type of work that has been scoped. So anything that is in pink over here has been marked as a defect, technical story, user story. So there are multiple views which we provide, wherein which you get a very clear picture on what has been planned and what is being expected from a release perspective, from a sprint perspective, across the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Now, quickly moving on to the next, I know that we are almost on top of the hour. Once you have defined your set up your plan, then the actual execution happens on a visual board. So there are a lot of configuration capability, visual elements which we provide in the visual board. Like say, for example, you can see that this user story is in risk because of certain delay that is getting factored due to various reasons. So there are multiple such indicators which we provide, which will help the teams when it comes to reviewing the execution, focus on those areas where an intervention is required. But more importantly, one of the important practices in agile teams is your stand-up meeting. So we provide an ability where you can perform your stand-up on the basis of teams. Like say, for example, if you're running a Kanban project where you don't have the boundary of a sprint, but you want to see what the team is doing, then you can do a team level sprint stand-up, or you can do a sprint level stand-up. I'm just going to move one of these icons a little bit down so that you can see. So what happens is when you choose a particular sprint, you see all the cards that has been scoped in that sprint for that particular sprint, and you will also be able to see where they are, from an execution perspective, how many of them that build development has been completed, where the testing is going on. And when you start the sprint meeting, we give you a timer. It shows you the team members who are part of that sprint. When I move when I'm looking at Eva Miller, I'll be able to see the cards she's working on, quickly get an input in a very and help her if she's having any difficulty. And then you get a timer over here just to make sure that team's time is not wasted in these discussions. You can then move on to the next resource. You will see the cards which that team is working on, and they can give an update and say what is the work they're going to prioritize and what is the work they're going to complete on that particular date. So like mentioned by Sudhi, this is not a status report, which typically gets generated at the end of a week or at the end of a fortnight. But this is a live collaborative session which you're having with the teams, where the teams are discussing how they are performing their work, what is it that they have prioritized, and where they are facing bottlenecks, and what can be done to help the team, so that at the end of the day, what is important is you need to measure the cycle time of the team. You need to deliver. The team has to deliver value. You cannot point it to a specific individual. So when you are working in such a collaborative manner, you are able to get insights in terms of what is the work pending, how does my burn down look, and then bring in the required interventions very early in the stage, not on the 10th day or on the 12th day, very early in your execution stage, and make sure that you will be able to reduce a lot of bottlenecks within the application. So those are some of the key points that I wanted to highlight. But apart from this, I'll just take 30 seconds to explain one key capability over here. So there is a question: when will I get this feature? When will this sprint? If this, what is the likelihood that this sprint or this release is going to meet the scope that has been set aside for it? So if you want to get those insights, we do have a program capability which is built based on relationships. We can talk about it at a later point of time. But what you're seeing here is you see that the team is currently delivering at a velocity of 0.25 cards per day. And if it is progressing at this pace, you are likely to have a spillover of 88 cards. And then you will try to ask which are those cards which are likely to have a spillover. You will get an indication over here, the cards where work has not been started, but has been marked as important for that particular sprint. So a lot of such views are being provided within the system, which will basically help you in adopting agile practically. One of the when Sudi and Mahesh started this session, one of the key questions that they said is, "What am I going to get?" And at the current space, if my team is not able to deliver, what should we do to make sure that the team is able to deliver what has been committed? And that is where the program management capability and the views, which I just showed you now, comes into play. So that's a quick overview. Mahesh, over to you. I know that I'm not covered a lot more, but because of time constraint, I'm just passing on the baton to you.
That's fine. Thanks for doing a great job as usual. Folks, we are at the bottom of the hour here in the US and top of the hour in India and so on. So I just wanted to make sure that we get to at least a few of the questions that have been asked. We got some great questions. Sudhi has been answering some of those on the Q&A panel directly. But Sudhi, you want to take up any questions online here? So one question that I think would benefit everybody, I'm not sure it went off to everybody, is that are there any certifications and training available on Pragmatic Agile? Uh, are we aware of any?
So very clearly, we are not talking about a new agile method. So please don't misunderstanding us as somebody who's trying to create yet another agile method. Okay, there are enough out there. There's no dearth of agile methods. What we are trying to do is to talk about some capabilities within the Nimble product that help your adoption of that agile journey. How to make it a little easier for the teams, create the foundation of continuous improvement and learning so that the teams can by themselves become better and better in this agile adoption. That's what Nimble's Pragmatic Agile is all about. Okay. I have tried to answer a lot of the questions, but some of the questions that I still could not complete. So let me just try and wrap them up. Ajit asked, how do you manage backlog prioritization to smallest level, and what goes into the execution phase and sprints? So clearly, what is the priority of the backlog is in discussion with the product owner during your sprint planning process. If you're following the Kanban method, you will have some kind of a simple ranking, top to bottom ordering of the cards, or putting a next column in your backlog to say, these are my prioritized cards, and from where the team can pull their cards, then their subsequent cards when they're done with their current card. So the prioritization is clearly has to be done by the business in discussion with the business. What goes into the execution phase and sprints? It is the value stream. Whatever is the value stream of your business. If you're in an ops environment, you will have one kind of value stream. If you're in a dev environment, you will have a different value stream. If you're in a pre-sales or a CRM environment, you'll have a different value stream. What goes in the journey of the upstream or the downstream is the definition of the value stream itself. And I'm not going to get into what is a value stream or how to define it for the for the paucity of time, but please do reach out to us if you want to schedule a separate session, and we can definitely take you through that concept. With regards to anonymous attendee, we would have loved to know you better. But with regards to story mapping, ChatGPT example aside, from the benefit of visualization, how would this differ from a work breakdown structure? Work breakdown structure that we have typically done in Microsoft Project, and we used to do in, for the longest time. When I started my career in 1990, that's how I used to make our work breakdown structures and plan our projects in Microsoft Project. The classic difference between work breakdown structure and stories is that work breakdown structure is all about dependencies. You break a whole bunch of line items into small line items. There are tons and tons of dependencies, and therefore such a project execution style always has a critical path. And then the critical path, the project team is continuously trying to figure out how to crash that critical path. And there were, the classic methods of fast tracking or some of those methods so that you can bring down the critical path. In Agile, by definition, there is no critical path. Guess what? There is no critical path in Agile. Why? Because the shortest critical path is your sprint duration. If you have got your refined stories ready and your team can start churning out sprints, story cards in 2 weeks, you are turning out value to business every 2 weeks. You're getting feedback from the customer every 2 weeks. So there is no big bang testing, there is no big bang acceptance phase because there is no critical path. So the beauty of Agile is, and all of us who have done waterfall model, we know delivery, we know that that last 10% of acceptance used to take 90% of the project effort. Everything would get discovered there. In Agile, the beauty is there is no critical path, there is no acceptance phase. Why is there no acceptance phase? Because you're continuously asking for feedback and acceptance at the end of every sprint as you're taking feedback, as you're rolling it out to business. So I hope I quickly communicated the difference there, and it was helpful a bit. Let me quickly go and see if there is any other question that I have not answered.
Okay. In the meantime, I just want to make sure that I share our contact information with all of you so that if you have any questions, follow-ups, or would like to connect for a better look at the system, we'd love to show that to you. But also, we did not cover all of our overall pragmatic agile coverage, and we are looking at doing a follow-up session with a more detailed coverage on just the various topics that we introduced in the middle of the presentation. And if you'd like to attend that, do let us know, and we will in any case reach out to you with your interest in attending a follow-up session, getting into a slightly more depth about pragmatic agile and how we provide coverage to it. Sorry, Suri, I don't know if you have any more questions you want to answer.
No, that's it. I think I did answer all the questions.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay, perfect. So, like we said earlier, we will share the recording of this session so that you have both the slides and the demo that Mano gave in a single file. And we'd love to again connect with you offline. But in the meantime, thank you so much for attending today's session. We really appreciate your time for staying through this session, and of course, hoping that we will connect with many of you to further discuss and learn from your experience with Agile. With that, thank you all. Thanks very much. Have a great rest of the day, or good night to those of you who may be attending from India. And again, thanks a lot. Thanks, Mano. Thanks, Sudi. I think a great session today.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.